Okay, and then I'm going to go into the share. Right, there we go. Okay, everybody, so we're now going to go into critical reading and thinking skills with a particular emphasis on level 1, level 2 functional skills, but obviously some of these issues, insights, techniques, strategies could also be applicable to entry level as well. Okay, I'm just going to have to do an audio. Sorry, guys, I just need to mute out. Okay, thank you. If we can just keep the audio, please switched off. That would be great, so we don't have any other kind of noises coming in. Fantastic. Okay, so we're going to be looking at level 1, level 2 reading and thinking skills. So we're going to be talking a little bit about metacognition as well, and how that applies to level 1 and level 2 teaching of reading skills. And even if colleagues and if they're new to functional skills or they're still unfamiliar with the format, etc. Still, in terms of our own understanding of what is effective reading, in terms of what we regard as being effective for particular purposes, and how we like to read and our reading styles, all of that personal information and insight is actually going to be relevant in terms of looking at techniques and planning around the functional skills. Okay, everybody, so let's then start off by doing a little starter activity. So which skills you are most likely to use when reading the following text? In each case, think about why you arrived at that particular decision. So let's do one at a time. So can you please type your answers into the chat box? So for number 1, a novel, which one would you use? Skimming, scanning, intensive reading, or extensive reading? Okay, right. So for a novel, it's intensive. Okay, then that's interesting. Okay, why are most of you saying intensive? Is there any reason for that? Why would an intensive approach be appropriate? Yeah, skimming and scanning as well. Direct, fantastic. Yeah, fantastic, brilliant stuff. So in terms of getting a full sense of it, and let me ask a question here now. In terms of how avid are in terms of avid reading, how avid are your students in terms of reading? Are any of them reading books at the moment? Yes or no? Are any of your learners book readers? Oh my God. Oh, here we go. A few are, some are, mostly nil. No. Okay. Right. Okay. My goodness me. Okay. So one of the things then really, I mean, what is it that's off-putting then for learners in terms of, is it because it's intense, because it requires a very intensive approach? They have to be focused. They have to have a positive reading habit or reading routine. So why is it that they're not picking up books and reading them? Okay, thank you, Shirley. Okay, some of them have difficulty with reading. Hopefully, we'll be able to give some particular strategies in this session. They lack focus. It's a stereotype. Some of mine will read manga but not novels. Okay, that's an interesting point. So it may well be the theme, the topic, the context. I mean, are any of your students motivated by particular, I don't know, people, celebrities, famous people, or people that they know who actually are writers? Does that motivate people to pick up a book if they know it's written by this person, that person? Okay, all right. Okay, interesting. Okay, right. Yeah, mastermind love YouTubers or football. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, okay, brilliant, brilliant. Okay, right. So we're going to crack on with the rest of this, and then we'll then have an overall discussion on the implications, really. Number 2, a newspaper. Okay, so which skills do you think are needed there? Skimming, scanning, intensive, extensive, newspapers. Yep, social media. That's correct. All right. Yeah, really good. All of them. Thank you. Thanks, Vicky. Thanks, Sabia. Okay, so, okay, all right, amazing, right? Poems, even though poetry reading is not part of functional skills, okay, but obviously it does require, but then again, some students may be interested in poetry. So what skills are needed there for poet? Number 3. Okay, skimming is coming a lot. Skimming is coming a lot. Intensive, that's interesting, Tariq. Yeah, it can be quite intensive, particularly if the language is unfamiliar. They need to be looking at the language very carefully. Okay, thank you very much. How about number 4? TV pages, online, skimming, scanning, intensive, extensive. Again, skimming is coming a lot. Okay, fantastic. Brilliant. Yeah, scanning, skimming, brilliant. Thank you. How about number 5, a postcard? What would you normally do there? Okay, Vicky, thank you. Scanning, so scanning there. Right, thank you, Joe. All right. All right, fantastic. How about a train timetable, number 6? Oh, I haven't looked at that. I haven't looked at a train timetable for 3-4 months. I wonder why. Fantastic. Sometimes I've had to use lightning skimming skills to look at information on train line when I'm catching trains up and down the country, running at the same time. Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, guys, very, very good. Some good feedback there from everybody. And number 7, a recipe. Skimming, scanning, intensive, extensive. Okay, that's great. Perhaps intensive. Brilliant. Okay. How about a travel brochure? Okay, then. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Now, that's brilliant. Fantastic. I mean, when we talk about extensive reading in terms of free reading, how many of your learners are actually motivated by the pleasure of reading? That they just like the book because they're very interested in the topic and they want to find out everything they can about that topic, even if it means reading a book. Okay, all right, okay. Because there lies possibly a solution, okay, to some of the issues that you've been mentioning here. Because with extensive reading, if, say, for example, we are understanding what themes, what topics, what subjects really motivate them, which really makes them tick, what are their go-to issues in terms of what they understand, in terms of what they like and what they don't like, and what actually triggers them to get motivated about something. Now, it could be something on television, it could be something on social media, there could be something happening locally, some local events, or some community project. It's really important to really find out at the beginning of the course, particularly if you do the literacy clock activity with your students, maybe during the induction stage, maybe after doing their diagnostic, and really finding out when they use reading skills on a day-to-day, hour-by-hour basis. And that way, then you might be able to build up a picture of what kind of readers are they, what topics interest them. I mean, could you just tell me now on the chat, what kind of themes and topics, just without attaching any text to it, what are they interested in? What makes them tick? Sorry to ask a very vague, broad question, but this is where we're going to be funneling down to the reading skills for level 1. Thank you, Shirley. Makeup. Right. Non-fiction, crime, murder, video games. Thanks, Tarek. Great. Celebrity. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Vicky. Boys. Okay. Marvel movies, manga. Yeah. Okay, right. And do you, in your teaching, obviously bearing in mind the scope of the functional skills, do you deliberately choose themes and topics to then start your session that will then lead into a text and reading work, which is around some of these topics that you're mentioning? Yeah, always. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm sorry to state the obvious here, because I'm obvious in terms of for post-16, particularly for 16 to 19s, where I do know that from my personal experience and talking to lots and lots of colleagues as well, working with lots of teachers, that once we actually find something that they're really keen on, they're interested in, then that is an absolute golden nugget for any functional skills English teacher to then grab onto and then start planning their sessions around it, okay? And getting all of the tick boxes on the functional skills criteria sorted while you are trying to weave in that topic, because there are a lot of motivational issues. However, the motivation itself can actually be worked on if we are connecting with the student's world. And it is about the interconnection between, like, looking at like the Venn diagram, because I talk about this a lot when it comes to relationships, and the teacher-student situation is a relationship of sorts whereby there is interaction, there is sharing of ideas, of values, of information, a common purpose, and then that's also then resulting in an overlap. And we want to make sure that that overlap is significant enough for the learners to be able to engage in what you're trying to teach them and what you're covering, and you've got hopefully most of their attention in class, and unwittingly we're not pushing them away. And I'm finding that in my own teaching of functional skills now in post-16, in terms of one of the major organizing principles of my teaching is around the topics and themes that make them click, in terms of, right, I like this. They have some chemistry, they have some kind of affinity towards something. And for my own growth mindset purposes, okay, I would choose topics that are not really, that I don't have, things that I might not be interested in or I have no knowledge in, but because it's something that connects with the learners, as an English teacher, I'm then wanting to find out more about the topic and look at the possibilities of then adapting my teaching itinerary and pedagogy around those topics and themes. So I get what I need to get in, out of the learners in terms of their skills development and preparation for the exams. So my agenda is clear, but within the context of things that they understand, but also the learners can then go on a journey with you, and they can hopefully be hopefully transfixed with all the information that you're presenting, but hopefully they'll be able to go further than that in terms of true engagement, and hopefully then they'll be able to see the value of the underpinning skills.
Sunil, can you let Paula in, please?
I will.
Thank you.
There we go. Okay then, thank you very much. Right, okay. So, okay everybody, thank you very much. There we go. Okay, thanks very much. Okay, fantastic guys. And I'm just going to move on now. Looking at, say, for example, the level 2 criteria. So learners will have to compare information, ideas, and opinions in the text, including how they are conveyed, identify implicit and inferred meanings in text, analyze texts of different levels of complexity, recognizing their use of vocabulary and identifying levels of formality and bias, and identify different styles of writing, and the writer's voice. Okay, then. All right. So what I would suggest now is, can you just tell me on the actual chat box, please, what kind of text at level, say level 2 or level 1, that you would normally be presenting to your students as part of a functional skills program? What kind of texts? So if you just make a note in the chat box. Right, let's have a look. Great, something related to their course or their lives if possible. Thank you, Shirley. Natasha, you're saying forums, news articles, emails. Excellent. Josh, articles, instructions, emails. Brilliant. Often I get them from the real world and then edit them to make them suitable. Level 1, wide variety. Thank you, Zabia. Amazon reviews, articles, speeches. Yeah, brilliant. Fantastic. It's also possible on YouTube, as long as the speech or the vocal delivery is done as clearly and coherently as possible, then when you actually watch a YouTube video, underneath the title, there are actually three dots. And if you click one of them, then you'll get an open transcript. So you can actually get a transcript of the actual video. So then you can, then it's got an automatic conversion into text. So that might be useful. Anybody use that feature on YouTube? If there is if you can't find the written form, but then you're using a video for teaching, but you're using a video for teaching, and you want to show it to learners in a textual form, that you can actually get a transcript from YouTube. Yeah, absolutely. It's the thing is though, when you get the actual when you get the actual transcript, what you need to do is you do need to put it through Word and make a few changes to it. But as long as the vocal delivery is clear, coherent, then normally it's transcribed pretty accurately actually. But it's a really good thing. So whatever video that, I mean, again, I tend to find videos in the pre-task stage before I give them the actual text really helpful, because then they like watching it. They're like, and then I give them a while watching activity by giving them a little sheet, or maybe just identifying the main purpose of what the person's saying, or to write down some key vocabulary in the video presentation. And then we'll then have a discussion, and then I'll then show them the actual transcript, and then we'll then do some further work around that. It may even be post-task work where we actually look at that in a bit more detail and look at the SPAG elements and the grammar, etc. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, please do check that. It's a really handy feature. So you can just convert normally. I mean, I found that with some of the speeches that I use for teaching functional skills English and also GCSE English, found it quite helpful. So hopefully that will work for you guys as well. Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. So, and also in terms of reading critically, okay? So tell me about your learners' critical reading skills, okay? Do they necessarily recognize who the author is and what their intended purpose is in that particular text? Do they understand things like tone, persuasive elements? Do they recognize bias? Do they know the difference between, in terms of fact and opinion? Can they identify bias, different types of bias? Are they also encouraged to explore the power relations within the text between the author and the reader? And also, are they encouraged to be passive readers or active readers? Tell me your thoughts on some of the things I've just mentioned, guys. Okay, thanks, Sabia. A little, yes. Not really. Dorette, you're saying Sitting Gill Smart Screen has... so some good videos for teaching across different elements. Brilliant. Excellent. I'm not sure whether those videos can be transcribed. That might be handy thing to look at. Okay, Shirley, they tend to be okay with fact opinion. Find inference and bias pretty hard. Yeah. I always like to get learners to use highlighter pens to and to use different colors so they understand the difference between fact and opinion, and they color those in where appropriate, and where it's explicit, where it's obvious, and where it's more inferential, using different colors there, and having like a coloring code, so everyone knows that when they use the blue one, it's really to identify fact, etc., etc. All right. So again, I think the art of annotation can be really helpful to help students to make a distinction between the different elements they're going to be assessed on their functional skills. And this is where we can then just draw it to the student's attention. Okay, Natasha, real problems being fact and opinion for some because of Facebook. But I mean, again, you know, if there are platforms where it's more easily identifiable where the bias is in the fact, leading up to texts that are more commonplace in functional skills, that might be the way to go. You might need to establish a little funnel or a little pipeline that actually engages them in the text that they are normally very familiar with, where there is fact and opinion, where there is bias. And even if it's very clearly biased, maybe to introduce that from a Facebook post, if that's appropriate, or from an article on LinkedIn, or whatever is appropriate, and then draw them in to how that underpinning skill is relevant in this article, in this newspaper article, in this email, in the kind of text that they're going to be asked to look at in their functional skills. Josh, you're saying mine often struggle with technical use of descriptive writing. Okay. Yes, fantastic. We're going to do a bit more work on that in the afternoon on that. We're going to be looking at some of the technical aspects of writing. Maybe from a textbook, Vicky, they struggle with inference. With inference, for me, if they really struggle with inference, then it does need to be that some skills have to be repeated, you know, over and over again, maybe every lesson or every other lesson. So, for example, for me, if I know my learner's struggling with inference, I'd be showing pictures which allude to the text, which I haven't showed them yet. And I'll be saying to them on the left-hand side, what do you actually see? What's obvious? And then what do you think it suggests? And if they can't get the inference out of that, I might give them an example. Or I'll tell them, well, this is what I'm inferring. Do you agree with that? What do you think? Can you add to that? So where they're struggling, we need to make sure that skill is repeated, okay? And that will then, again, help them to go along a growth mindset. Zubia seems to be able to identify persuasive text, structural text, but struggle with other types of text. Now, one of the things that I used to do when some years ago, when I used to have my own classroom, he says, you know, like a course leader for a level, and had responsible for the displays of a classroom, being an English teacher, I would want to make things obvious to my students as they walked in. So I would probably, I can remember now, there'd probably be a display where I have, for example, instructional language, persuasive, descriptive, informative. I'd have examples of text. I'd even have like little versions of them as little pictures. Then I would have a whole row of keywords. So when they look at the picture and then the text type, then they've got the keywords there, okay? Now, obviously now with mobile phones, encourage your students, if you can get that done, if students can create those things, brilliant, because walls can teach, walls can promote learning. And then, again, if they're able to use mobile phones, ask them to take pictures of certain things. For example, you know, take a picture of that, use it in your lesson, refer to it. So they've got it at their fingertips, okay? So little tricks like that might really, really help and give learners real ownership as well. Because the problem that I find with this is one of the reasons why learners are put off by looking at text or doing the question. They just don't seem to have any relationship with it. They don't have any relationship or connection or affinity with the skill, with the topic, or the rubric of the question. But if we are engaging them more into it, and we're bringing it more to them and getting them to talk about it, then we might be able to increase engagement, and hopefully then they'll be able to follow through on different tasks. Yeah, okay, so and you said, Zabia, they seem to be able to identify, yeah, I've done that one. Natasha, struggle between inform, explain, and describe. Sometimes, like I said, you know, a wall displayer, the differences in the key language in tabularized formats, so everything is columnized, compartmentalized, etc. That might help. Or maybe like a handout they can refer to every session, or a lesson that you're looking at. This might be good. Football match reports are great. Yeah, football. Amazing. Sometimes I find things like, depending on the learners, you know, something about cooking. As long as I've mentioned cooking, or I mentioned football or snooker, or something happening like, I don't know, I know, for example, I work with colleagues at a college near Glastonbury, and obviously around May, June time, they're going to be talking about the actual festival, and the lessons are around the festival. And in Bridgewater, they have this marvelous carnival, and it's absolutely amazing. And then all their lessons embed the carnival, and everyone's engaged. It's amazing. So things like that. So if anything is happening topically, locally in Nottingham around that time, that you think you could have it as a feature that is across the whole board, and then you got more teachers connected with the topic, and then more sharing of ideas may come, then that's something worth looking at as well. Fantastic. Okay, that's brilliant. Okay, thank you very much for that. So it's really important that we do bring the text and the rubric more close to the students, so they really connect with it and they don't identify. So I want to give you some ideas and some suggestions. In terms of metacognition, okay, this is a really, really important thing that we're going to be talking about, because are our learners aware of what they're doing or what they need to do to be able to become good readers and to be able to comprehend information quickly and easily? Are they aware of the cognitive abilities that they need to engage with for them to be able to read effectively? What are your thoughts about that? For example, do they think about what they've been asked to do, or do they just do it and just forget about it? What I'm trying to say is, are they just connecting with the task in their conscious mind and saying, okay, we have to answer all these questions and we'll just look at it quickly and that's it and it's done? Or are they actually given some time to be able to use their subconscious part of their mind to be able to be a bit creative, to do a little bit more work around it, to do some research? Tell me about this. Tell me about your learners' metacognition skills. For me, what really helps the development of metacognition skills for good readers is if I do a very good pre-task array of sessions and activities. So I'll be doing lots of things around building up the context and prediction, for example. You know, predict what you think the text might be about if I give you the title. Show them the video, you know, give them a little quiz, little matching activity. Anything just to get them thinking and using their logical reasoning skills before we get into the reading per se. Let's have a look what people are saying. Okay. Yeah, fantastic. Just connecting with the task, then forgetting about it. Thank you. Don't think many of the weak readers have any idea about how to read, which is why they give up. Yeah, have a learning and meaning booklet. Fantastic. We're going to be talking about meaning making, Vicky, in one of the slides. We're going to look at a quadrant to be very, very helpful. Will obviously will give us some further ideas as well. That's great comments, guys. Thank you very much. Keep putting your comments down. That's really fantastic. Because do they just see it as a chore? Do they just see it as yet another task they have to do? Or do they actually see the true value of it? And it may well be that our teaching of reading skills at level 1, level 2 may need to slightly pivot to include why they've been asked to do it. And the pivoting and the metacognitive development also comes into play when you try to make links with what they like to read and how they like to read and how they read best, because you've identified that at the start of the program. For example, you've managed to identify their multiple intelligence kind of network, you know, what's happening there, or their literacy club, you've identified that. So you're picking up things about their metacognition skills. Also, they've told you what kind of job they're going to be applying for once they've finished their college studies, or what is their next step? Is it university? Is it apprenticeships? Or is it entrepreneurship? Because you've asked the question and you know that, you're going to be then embedding some of those things in your teaching, in your questioning, in your justifying, in your explaining, in your choice of resources and materials and techniques. Because that's also going to make the students think, the reason why my teacher's given me this newspaper article, because it's actually relevant to me. The actual context, the news bit might not be, but the actual skills are. So that's why I'm going to connect with it. Okay. So it's about making sure that they think about what they've been on and they're looking at the value of it. Okay. Even if you have to teach a little lesson on metacognition and turn it into a reading comprehension, why not? Because that's how I used to get my message across, particularly to post-16 students in college and in prison, where I wanted to not only teach them the underpinning curriculum skills, but I wanted to increase their general knowledge, their pragmatic awareness, and also for them to be able to slightly think about and reflect on their behaviors in class, where if I just told them off, that is going to just go through the conscious mind and they're going to forget about it. But I want the information to be hard hitting, so it goes in their subconscious mind, where they're forced to think, they're forced to reflect. Okay, so these are the things that, you know, that work really well for me. I mean, for example, if I've noticed that learners are using pretty bad language in class, just in their general conduct in class, and I think it's suspect, and I know they're not meaning to offend anybody by using bad language, but it's just the way they're expressing themselves. So I would choose an article about the appropriacy of language or bad language or swearing or slang. And then, you know, and hopefully they'll understand by doing the reading comprehension, they're going to then be more aware of what words they use and the impact of them, and to make more appropriate choices depending on the context. And it's okay to swear if it's in a context that's acceptable, like with your mates, your friends, etc. Okay? So just giving learners more opportunities and more choices. Got a few more comments. It's very rare I find, Paula, that entry dealer that chooses to read anything other than their phone. That's a really good point, Paula. Again, the phone could be the start of the funnel, okay, where something that you might present. I mean, I've presented in sessions little excerpts from phone messages, not my own or anybody else's, but things that I've made up, which are in very informal language, using emojis, and then we then build it up so we can rewrite it, or how would it read in the newspaper, how would it read in the informative text, etc. So we take them away from the text speak to something more formal, to give them more choices. Okay, but yeah, it's a very, very valid point. Thank you very much, Paula. Direct, they read it as reading for purpose and therefore have no lasting connection with it. We've got to start thinking, guys, about how we can make the learners connect with the theme of the text and all the underpinning skills that you're trying to promote, for them to have a connection with that. And it may well mean that you may have to slightly pivot your teaching. For me, I'm always trying, and again, I'm work in progress, guys. I haven't got it all. I'm still learn from my colleagues as well. That for me, in the modern day post-16 context, I cannot ignore the development of metacognition skills. So before reading, they might clarify their purpose for reading and previewing the text. During the reading, monitor their understanding, adjusting the reading speed to fit the difficulty of the text, fixing any comprehension problems they have. This is more like assessment for learning, observing how they read. Maybe you might want to model the reading aloud modeling. Very helpful. That might be something that you might want to do. After reading, check their understanding, because if they're not motivated to read, and particularly, guys, level 1, level 2, they've got any student doing any English language program, whether it's functional skills or it's entry skills or it's stepping stones or it's GCSE, they've got to read. It's just, it's such a powerful reciprocal tool in their itinerary that it just cannot be underestimated. So in terms of building metacognition skills in our students, identify where the difficulty occurs. Now, have I shown you a assessment for learning strategy list of 13 techniques that you can use with your learners to do this kind of checking? Yes or no? Have I given you like it's a double-sided document on assessment for learning for developing, well, it could be reading, could be writing. Yes or no? I probably haven't. I'm not sure. Probably no. Okay, guys. Okay. I'm just going to make a note of that in my book because this is like, you know, it's just like 13 alternative ways of doing a traffic light system with your learners, checking that, you know, for example, very simple example would be you'd have a green card, an amber card, and a red card, or some kind of coloring system on traffic lights actually next to the learner's work as they're sitting down, they're working. And as you're going round robining and you're checking on their reading, you're asking them to point to which card best represents how they're finding this particular reading task. And little things like that you can pick up, and then you can then go a bit more deeper in terms of tutoring them, finding out what they're struggling with. That's so important, you know, so important where you understand where the difficulties are for every single individual student. Okay, guys, I'm going to just, you know, quite a lot of resources I create myself, and I have got a handy sheet on assessment for learning, which will be really helpful to help learners with the development of their reading skills. And in terms of their thinking and their metacognition skills, AFL is really, really good for that, okay? So identify where it occurs, where the actual difficulty is. Can they restate the difficult sentence or passage they don't understand? You know, be specific. Tell us what the problem is, because if we don't know what the problem is, we can't manage it, and we need to hear it from the learners. The learners need to tell us exactly, precisely what the problem is. Even if the learners are shy or reticent or they don't have the vocabulary to tell you, then use Thunk's questioning. Okay, then, Michael, is it because it's the title? Did the title throw you? Okay, Michael, was it this particular word here that completely, you know, got you confused? Okay, was it because of the writer's writing style? You didn't quite understand, you know, the premise of the writing, why they wrote the way they did. All right, so things like that, where you are predicting their difficulties, you load them up into a verbal frame that you use when you then checking with your learners that, you know, if you okay with, if you're not, then let me ask you some questions, okay? Look back through the text, and again, you can use the Feynman technique by asking them to go back to the reading, go back to the work that we did, and then for them to be able to then tell you what is it about, what is the writer's intention, what is the main point of this text, any key words that you think identifies this as instructional text, okay, etc. Can you spot any metaphorical language? Can you spot any language features? Tell me. All right. So all this is really, really important. So look back in the text for information that might help them to resolve the difficulty. Okay, then. Right, guys. Okay. Right, now, it's now 11:15. Okay, so, well, just gone after. So we're going to take a short 5-minute comfort break, guys, but please do carry on writing your comments, and we're then going to carry on with this topic. Okay? Thank you. Okay, everybody, welcome back. Let me just check that no one's in the waiting room. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, right, let's move forward and just look at a little bit of research that's been done on reading. Okay, I'm not sure whether anybody has come across this quadrant before. So essentially, with this research, it said that there are basically four main areas that actually tend to be the focus in reading comprehension. Okay, and it may well be that when we go into each of them, you may wish to I don't know, evaluate where you guys are at with regards to, are you using, do you think, more text analysis approach in the development of reading comprehension skills, or is it more meaning making, is it more code breaking, or is it just about text use? Okay, so with regards to code breaking, this is where a teacher would then be looking at the actual language itself, the language that's actually used in a piece of text. So the teaching would be around trying to decode words with phonics, for example, maybe to look at the whole word itself and looking at maybe the information before and after it in terms of contextual clues, looking at the actual morphology, the parts of speech, looking at the grammar, looking at how the sentences are made up, looking at the syntax, looking at the subject verb order arrangement, looking at the use of how, what types of sentences do we have here? Are they all simple, basic ones? Are they compound? Are they complex, etc.? And in terms of etymology, with regards to the history of the language, because, words have a history all of their own. And it may well be that maybe a particular, kind of history of particular words and vocabulary might also be important in helping the learners to unlock their understanding. So a teacher may have a code breaking approach, or they may use this to help learners understand a particular part of the text, or for them to address a question. Okay, now particularly with the level one, with the level two, particularly where they're going to be asked to identify language features, and in like a level two functional skills piece of text. So they need to be knowing things like direct speech, or alliteration, or metaphors, or similes. So they just need to be having an understanding of some of those features for them to be, and again, that will require some kind of a code breaking kind of activity. What I like to do with some of my students, and I probably have a worksheet that I could show you on a functional skills, on a recent functional skills sample assessment, whereby the learners were asked to read a piece of text, and then they have to identify the language feature and the examples. And what I did was I wrote out all the language features I could see, then I then identified the examples myself, and then I converted it into a matching activity. And that for me is code breaking. Okay, all right, so where you're doing lots of work at language level, okay? The next one is meaning making. Now, in terms of the schema activation and prediction, in terms of the schemata, that's so important for me as a teacher, because I make no assumptions about the students' prior knowledge of the topic in the text. I want to try and bring that out before I show them the text. So if it is something about climate change, then I really would like to know, do they know what climate change is? Do they have any views on it? Are they aware of anything that's happening with regards to climate change, nationally, internationally? Just to see how tuned in they are. And then they may well have lots of knowledge, lots of awareness, and I want all that to come out. So I'm going to be activating their schemata so we can see what, how is our pragmatic knowledge shared? And also looking at different comprehension strategies. Now we're going to be quickly, before we finish this session, be looking at some specific strategies, which are called DARTS strategies. So DARTS is an acronym for directed activities relating to texts. Directed activities relating to text, okay? So there are a number of them in terms of sequencing, labeling, etc. So I'll go through some of those in terms of helping the learners to make the meaning, okay? And also vocabulary, pre-teaching of some key vocabulary which they will later find out in a text, but you look at them beforehand. And sometimes I always like to maybe, as they walk in, put some of the keywords on the board, represent them as anagrams for them to be able to then resequence the letters to make the appropriate spelling, or create letter tiles for them to be able to group words together. And I'll say the clue is that some of these words are related to this topic, blah, 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 which we're going to find in the text a bit later on, or you may not want to say that, but you're getting them to work on the meaning, and that's so important. Okay, right. So maybe some of you might be thinking, well, maybe I've got more of a text analysis approach to developing reading skills, in terms of trying to really get underneath the skin of what the author's intention is with this text. Does the learner necessarily draw a connection between the text and the author? Why did the author write like this? Do you think they have a personal interest in this? Maybe some personal history? Do they feel very strongly about it? So just really about trying to get them to really have that connection. And also understand how texts position us. Do we have our own position? Because, are our learners quite passive with this aspect? Do they accept everything they read, or are they challenged to become critical readers, that they actually look beyond and they don't have to agree with everything? Okay, because that's something particularly at the higher levels. They are going to have to develop that kind of critical mindset, but in a constructive way, not a negative way, in a constructive way. And this is done through text analysis. And when you go on to the text use in terms of, again, how, do you use this quite often in terms of understanding the actual genre and what we do with the text, finding and using and responding to the text. What is the purpose of this particular text? So things like, whether it's informative, persuasive, and all those kind of things will then come into play here. So do you tend to look at that? Now, my big question is this, guys. Tell me now, from your experience of teaching reading skills, developing the students' comprehension skills for functional skills or any other English language courses, are you kind of focusing on particular ones, or do you have a mix and a match approach depending on the learners, the level, the situation, the theme? Could you now just spend a few minutes now, give me your feedback on this, please? Where are you at? Right, I'm just going to pin the chat box now. Okay, thank you, Josh. Text analysis and text use. Okay, fantastic. So, Josh, do you think you might want to consider more code-breaking meaning making as well? Liz, you're more mix and match. Brilliant. How about the rest of you? Probably more the bottom two. Yes. I would probably say, again, working with lots of teachers again, there tends to be that the code breaking and the meaning making is not neglected, but it's not overshadowed, but it tends to be that the text use and the analysis tends to dominate. And that's fine, that's okay. But I think as practitioners, we just have to make sure with the demands of the functional skills curriculum now, whether we need to consider doing more code breaking, more meaning making. Okay, Joe, you're saying, I like the idea of code breaking. I have an escape room scenario playing in my mind. Sounds interesting. Marvelous. And I use lots of different, thank you, Shirley, lots of different strategies depending on the learners, but do quite a lot of phonics and teaching word families to help them work it out themselves. Brilliant. Yeah, fantastic. Word families, we talked about this in the previous session when we looked at phonics, word families, semantic fields. These are really handy. You can really do a lot of work on that. You could really, in a piece of text, in terms of code breaking, if you think that a piece of text uses a lot of sounds with I, and then you look at all the different spelling of the graphemes of the I, that can really be helpful for their reading and their spelling as well. Or S, sa, the actual sa sound, because sa can be represented as a C-E, or a C-I, or a double S, or a C-E, or a singular S. So that could be a useful thing. You may want to start looking at some of the phonics approaches to help you with the code breaking, really helpful. With code breaking as well, you may want to give students a piece of text where there's grammatical errors and they have to correct those errors, and then they have to reread them, they have to then rewrite them for them to be able to, and because they've been asked to error correct, they're automatically acquiring an understanding of the text, okay, without having to read it, because they are resequencing the grammar, okay? So that might be another way, because the code breaking could automatically help them to do the engagement and find the true value of something. Anything else comes to mind, guys? Okay, anything there that you think you might want to consider doing differently yourselves? Please let me have your feedback. Do you think now, having an understanding of what's involved in the functional skills, in terms of some of the key requirements, and with the new subject specs, do you feel that any of you need to pivot your teaching approach and pedagogy around reading? Josh, you're saying, yeah. Liz saying more phonics, brilliant, excellent. Josh, you're saying code breaking ties in with my phonics deficit, so it'd be worthwhile for me to pursue. Definitely, Josh, absolutely. And you know, the post-16 phonics toolkit, some really good case studies done by our colleagues in the sector on how they've gone about code breaking. The whole phonics thing will really give you a real insight into code breaking for reading, particularly if it's something that we're not familiar with, we've not been exposed to it, our learners haven't been, but then you might see it as a solution. Brilliant stuff. You can do lots of creative word-based work around reading, which will be very engaging for your students. That would be really good. Zabia, you're saying include more text analysis and code breaking. Marvelous, very good. Tariq, more topical text. Absolutely. Anything that is current, contemporary, that people are talking about, etc. I know that when I'll be working with my next cohort of students, we are going to be looking at things around some of the issues that have happened sort of socially, psychologically, economically around the lockdown. For me, the lockdown is like a whole course. So I'll be looking at the lockdown. Lockdown has given me lots of ideas for teaching functional skills, everybody. Lots and lots of stuff there. Lots of news articles, lots of videos, lots of different things there I'm going to be looking at there in terms of teaching functional skills and using lockdown as a common shared experience. Meaning making and text analysis, that's very good, Dorette. Reading for pleasure. Any suggestions to read as a whole class? Okay, fantastic. That's a really good question for everybody. From Joe. Anything that will help people to read for pleasure. And for me, I suppose anything that once you identify what they like to read in their everyday life through the literacy clock, then probably from there, you can probably give some specific suggestions and do. Now, again, going on the Goodreads website is very good. Going on the Goodreads, because that might also help to then, break down, one's search for books. Ready Player One would be a great class read. Very good. Okay. Holes Together once. Very good. Okay. Fantastic. Good. Getting some good ideas there, everybody. All right. Fantastic. Okay. Now, in terms of fluent readers, decide if something is worth reading. Have a purpose. Recognizing the genre at text level, sentence level, and word level. Okay. So are our learners encouraged to do, when it comes to reading, are they encouraged to work at text level, sentence level, and word level, or is it mostly text level? Could you tell me in the chat box, where are you at with this in terms of how learners recognize the genre, the different styles? Okay, text level, okay. Yeah, text level from Josh. Glance organizational features are giveaways. Yes, particularly if there are any discourse markers and signpost words that kind of tell you that something's going to be added on to this next point, or there's going to be a different point that we made, or there's going to be some comparison going on. So we're going to be looking at some of these signposty words in the reading session in the afternoon. Really help for their writing as well. Skimming through. Okay, all right. So guys, I'm just giving you my own kind of experience here. I tend to find that, yeah, sometimes maybe starting at text level, but then when students are being asked questions around some of the technical aspects of the language, then this is where we do need to think about doing more sentence level work and word level work. Even if it means if you have to extract a sentence or a group of words and display them, and then have a discussion around it, and then do some further work around some of the specifics and the technicalities. And even if there are some common language features that are coming across, to be able to highlight them and to confidently talk about them, okay? Where we can get more into the sentence and word level. Because once we as teachers start having, if we start to look at our own narrative in the classroom, and if we ourselves are using some of these language terms ourselves that the learners are being exposed to, then again, that sets an expectation of the learner to then be able to possibly, you know, refer to a language feature back in their explanations. Well, I thought that was a metaphor, blah, blah, blah. You know, we want some of the language features to go into the narrative of the students, okay? And that's really important for them to get a really good appreciation of language and language use in reading. And now, obviously, now it's being assessed now, particularly level 2. So it's about looking at the narrative in the classroom as well, which is why for me as a teacher, I do get down to sentence and word level, but I do the text level, but I get down to it particularly. And also scanning, skimming, critical reading, etc., responsive reading, use the information, throw away the leaflet, pass on the detail, change their minds about something. Okay, tell me guys about, do you use, in terms of, I mentioned some, in terms of the metacognition pre-task, do some of you use any visual literacy prompts in your teaching of reading skills to help your learners understand textual information? So for example, do you show your students lots of diagrams or charts or graphs, graphical information? Do you give them lots of tabular information? Do you give them cutaways, like nets, for example, you know, for them to be able to talk about? Like it could be of a cube, or it could be of a flattened out pyramid, for example, which explains something about the text. Do you, okay, fantastic. Do you use flowcharts? Do you present information in flowcharts? Do some of you use infographics? Infographics are fantastic. There's things like Pictochart. You can create your own infographics. Infographics are another marvelous way of presenting information. It's a very good alternative. It's a very sophisticated alternative to using PowerPoint, for example, to present information. I am one of these days going to create some infographics for this level 5 once I have time. Once I have 5 minutes, I'll do it. But at the moment, I'm relying on PowerPoint. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah, things, that's really good, Ross. Graphs, pie charts, basic text about the 2017 elections, because the visual literacy is going to definitely appear in level 1, level 2, where learners are going to have to develop a kind of an interplay between the visuals and then the text. But what I'm trying to say here is it may well be that the visuals could be your cue and the way in for the learner to then eventually go into the text. What I like to do is, if we are looking at flowcharts or graphs or tables, is I will then present bits and pieces of text from the overall text, ask them to attach it to the graph, you know, where there's a trend or something, or where it's linked to the legend or the key, okay? Or where it's linked to a particular element or a particular component in a flowchart. So they start to then interact, and then they work with the text. I'm giving you an example of darts activities here, okay? But it's a way of getting learners to be more visual and kinesthetic in their ability to acquire a better understanding of the piece of text. That way then they can make the connection between visual literacy and your standard textual literacy, and also they can see the power of images and how it can help to improve their understanding. And also, you also allow them to be able to talk about their own understanding of these visual literacy prompts as well, okay? So really helpful. Can I say, guys, any of you use Pinterest to teach functional skills English? Yes or no? Pinterest? I'm assuming people have heard of this app, this website, Pinterest. Anybody use Pinterest to teach English? Yes, love it. No, I don't. Yes, I do. Not for teaching. Okay, fantastic. Pinterest is a very good visual Google. If you're looking at something visual, it could be about anything. It could be about, you know, getting a recipe for fruitcake, or looking at interior design ideas for your living room. But also, there are lots of visuals there for teaching. I mean, I use it a lot for teaching English and for teaching maths. There's lots of fantastic picture charts and infographics. People have done little PowerPoints and things. It's very, very good repository of excellent, naturally occurring visual literacy items. Okay, fantastic, Shirley. Use images for GCSE. Love it. I love that. I use lots of images and visual literacy, particularly, Shirley, when I'm teaching 19th century text, I don't half go on heavy on the visual literacies if I have to, and the videos. To lead them into the dreaded 19th century text and the language and the meta language. Okay, so, okay, brilliant. Also, guys, any of you use Google Images for teaching English? Google Images. You ever thought about using Google Images to find pertinent images or visuals to teach a text that you've got in mind? Okay, predominantly for cute cat pictures. Very nice, Josh. So they're very cute. Fantastic. Yes, majority saying yeah, novel extracts. Brilliant. It's a simple hack. It really is. Just go into the visuals. Really, I'm a visual learner. And I'm a massive fan of teaching through visuals and visual literacy. But obviously, this is a mainstay, obviously, for functional skills assessment as well. Okay. So some of you might be thinking, well, maybe I'm not using enough. Maybe I could base my presentation on that. Fantastic. Make sure it's something a bit different, something a bit new that's going to extend your knowledge and repertoire. This is what we want this course to do for everybody. Okay. I think at this point, I'm going to slightly change my slide and I'm going to show you something about the darts. Okay. Can you all see this? Oh, this is what happens. Okay. Right. Let me just, okay. Ah, right. Oh, the screen sharing is behaving itself today. Normally things don't go right for me on a Tuesday, but maybe things might be changing. Okay, guys, I talked about darts. Now, you probably use these anyway, guys, but obviously it's just a bit of a refresher, or some of you may be new to it. But for me personally, when I'm teaching reading skills, developing their comprehension skills, their understanding of textual information, I always try to keep my lessons activity-based, okay? It's not a case where I just get them to read silently or passively for any length of time, because I know the attention span will switch off and then they'll start twiddling their thumbs and looking at their phones. And I know that because if I've got engagement issues, motivational issues, I've got to pre-plan activities that will just keep them on board. And also in my vision, my quest to help my learners develop a love for reading in terms of more extensive reading skills development, but also in terms of having a connection with the context, connection with the rubric, a connection with the value of reading, and a connection with the underpinning skills within the functional skills. And the darts can really, really help, okay? So basically, with darts, they can do gap fills, okay? And the gap fills, they may sound a little bit classic, but they're very powerful as well. And these really help students to understand context, vocabulary, etc. And what you might want to do, you might want to use a gap fill as a predictive activity. And I've done this several times. So it may well be the introduction to a text, which sometimes I find students might struggle with reading. And normally that tends to be the gateway for them to want to carry on reading all the rest of it. So what I might do as a pre-task, I might give them a gap fill to do from the actual text. And with the more capable learners, I won't give them the missing words, but the ones who may struggle, I will give them a choice of words. And I may well even, if I have time, if I did this electronically, I'd use Go Conquer, and I would then create a drop-down box right after each gap, and they have a choice of 3 words. A bit of a thunk style thing there. That way then you get them thinking, use their subconscious mind, get them to do peer learning, talk to each other, and then they've got their answers. You give them the correct answers. You do the modeling with them in terms of for them to discover why the correct answer is correct. Then you can then do maybe main purpose work, gist work, specific work on language, and then you can show them the whole text and do it like that. Okay? Prediction is fantastic. I sometimes, even if I've done all my visual work, video work pre-task, when I start the task, I might just give them the title. and ask them to guess what it's about. Now, prediction really helps the learners to use their subconscious mind to create a hypothesis in terms of predicting what the text might be about. Is it apple, oranges, or bananas? And then by having some understanding of the title, that they'll be then preloaded with a hypothesis that will hopefully motivate them to read the rest of it so they can approve or disprove their hypothesis, if that makes sense. Okay, so prediction can be really powerful, really helpful. And sequencing, I do this in various ways. Group activity, just cut up the text into pieces, get them to resequencing it. And again, what you might want to do is you might want to be very careful where you place the cut. The cut could be maybe after semicolons or after commas. So they're like, you know, half sentences everywhere. You might want people to, you know, build their understanding of the spag element in the text, because for level 1, they have to understand the role of punctuation. And so if you placed a cut immediately after a semicolon, they have to then find the other part of the after the semicolon to understand what a semicolon is. Okay, so that might be helpful there. Also, you might want to turn the sequencing into a group activity. If there are 20 students, 10 pieces, get them to work in pairs, and at random, you give each pair a piece. They have to physically line themselves up from the left side of the room to the right side of the room, and then they have to resequence themselves accordingly with the first person or first group on the left-hand side of the wall. That's the introduction or the title, going all the way adjacent, all the way to the bottom, which is the conclusion. Okay, so you can do sequencing like that. You can also use, if it's for example digital, you could use active inspire software and put them as like mini pieces of text, get the learners to then sequence them together, or whichever other digital platform you might want to use to help them to sequence. Okay, or put them on cards, get them to work together. Really good for working that subconscious mind. That's an example of a darts activity. Whole group analysis, collaborative activities, interpreting text that do not have to be a solitary activity that can work together as groups. Have you ever considered giving your students reading roles? Do you give, when you ask your students to work on a piece of text as a group, do you get them to, you know, for example, you'll say, right, this person is going to demystify the title. This person is going to explain what the introduction's about. This person is going to look at the language features. And this person's going to summarize the whole purpose or the whole intention or the writer's purpose. So have you considered giving your learners a role in a group? Yes or no? Specific roles. The roles could be written on, in the classroom, in the walls. Oh, everyone's gone silent for some reason. Everybody all right? Okay, I take it that silence is golden then. Okay, no problem. So maybe worth thinking about allowing your students to have particular roles. And then what I like to do is that you can mix the roles up, and you can also change the text as well. And you can keep the text size quite small. So in about 10, 15 minutes, maybe everyone has used a particular role and they've covered quite a few texts. So that could be a really productive activity. And also to reconstruct text. So they could actually reconstruct text into diagrams. So this is an example of a transformation activity. So essentially here, what students would be doing is they'd basically be encouraged to read a piece of text and then represent it as a flowchart, represent it as a diagram. Has anybody heard of the Lotus blossom technique on how this could be used for developing reading comprehension skills or writing? Yes or no? The Lotus blossom technique? Okay. Oh, sorry, I must be clicking the wrong button. Here we go. Yeah, no, yeah, okay, right, fantastic. Okay, so just imagine with the Lotus Blossom technique, if you can present them with a grid, maybe on an A4 piece of paper or A3, and basically there are 9, it's a grid, 3 by 3, 9 boxes, all right? And you put the title of the text, or you could even put the actual text in the middle. And then the learners they have to then use the other boxes to then do a summary sentence on each important aspect. What's the title about? What's the introduction telling you? Tell about the language. You could even pre-write little instructions in each of the outer boxes to give them a purpose. It's basically a graphic organizer for reading. So that might be really helpful to help learners to transform the text in a more meaningful format. Because some learners might not be able to get the full breadth of what you're asking them to understand in a continuous piece of text with sentence after sentence after sentence. But by glancing at a Lotus Blossom diagram or a flow chart might do the trick. And what you might want to do as well, and I've done this several times, I've presented a piece of text as a flow chart, as a Lotus Blossom, before I've given them the text. And then once they've identified with the imagery and the visual aspect and they've understood it, and if I link it with imagery, then I then show the text. Because some learners, I mean, are your learners, I'll ask a question. When you give them a whole piece of text, are they put off by it? Are they put off by, yeah, you know, when you just like, sometimes we do our best. And I know sometimes, you know, I just assume that if I give the whole text on this paper, on this question 1 and a reading level 1, they're gonna read it and appreciate it. Okay, yeah, it depends on the size. It certainly does. Okay, this is why having a darts-based approach, you are being very conscious as practitioners as to how much you expose to them and how you expose to ensure maximum engagement, and we limit the disengagement from the learners. Okay. And again, some of you might be thinking of possibly using one or a few of these darts activities to plan your presentations because you never maybe thought about it consciously, or you want to do a bit more work on it. But yeah, really powerful. Just thinking of the time, we've got a few minutes left. So just let me have your comments, guys. Okay, thank you so much indeed. Right, okay, so that's dart. Any comments or queries about the darts? Okay, I'm just going to go back into my PowerPoint, just make sure. Okay, so just some further information on research that's been done through the NRDC, which used to be the National Research Development Center for looking at literacy skills, but some of their documents are still fabulous. And it's a summary of some of the research findings, and hopefully I've tried to allude this in today's presentation, webinar rather. The reading comprehension is an active process. We are active in developing those skills, and the learners are active in their learning of reading, okay? It involves cognitive and linguistic processing, okay? So making full use of their metacognition skills, looking at sentence level and word level work. Meaning is influenced by prior knowledge. So why don't we extract that schematic knowledge, that pragmatic knowledge out of the learners first through the pre-task, through videos, little games, quizzes, discussions, anything, you know, or some darts activities that will really help us to understand what they understand about the topic. Explicit attention to vocabulary development aids comprehension, okay? This is so true. And this is what's going to be assessed, particularly level 2, where learners will be asked to identify language features and their examples. So we need to feel comfortable with that. And if I can just probably just finish this off and give you an example of an activity I developed. And also understanding of the context is key to understand the text. So if we feel that we're not doing enough work on understanding the context before we show the text, then that's something to bear in mind as well. Okay, right, guys, I'm going to, what I'm going to do, just to finish off now, before we head off for lunch, I'm just going to make a note of some key documents I need to be putting in to the Padlet for this particular day's training. And one is the AFL strategies for checking in on your students' understanding and learning while they're learning in lifetime. The other one is I'm going to also give you one of my materials on trying to, for level 2, identify language features and examples in a functional skills piece of text. And anything else that I can come up with, I will put them in the Padlet. Okay? All right, guys. Right. So, does anybody want to share any thoughts? The last 2 minutes. Anybody developed any thoughts, any ideas for their own teaching of reading, level 1, level 2? Or in terms of their presentations? Any thoughts that anybody wants to share? Any questions they want to ask me? Any clarification? I would like an anonymous box at the start of term where they can input their interest. Brilliant idea. Oh, yes. Fantastic. Because, Josh, we have to we have to teach for protecting street cred. Isn't that right? Our students. They don't want to reveal that they're fans of Mozart or something. Is that right? Sorry for the tongue in cheek there. I couldn't help myself. But I love the idea, Josh. I love that, because you want them to connect with it and you want to find out from them, but we don't want to put them off, and we don't want their street cred to go under. Okay. So I mean to say that it would be a good avenue. Fantastic, Josh. We're on the same page there. Brilliant idea. Very simple, but I think that anonymous box is going to be your secret weapon, Josh. I'm telling you now. In this common quest to educate the nation through the post-16 sector. Brilliant idea. Fantastic. I think that's a great one. Shirley's supporting you there, Josh. Amazing. How do we go about sharing our presentation with others? I'm unsure about. You mean on the Zoom, Dorette? You mean how you share it? You mean how you share your slides as you are talking? Is that what you were referring to, Dorette?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. You just need to start to learn to use screen share. So all you have to do is, I've got the Zoom open here. Just make sure that you've got your slides opened. The document is opened. Then when you go into Zoom, what you do is you just have to then click screen share at the bottom. Can you see that? The bottom of the screen. Click that, and then it will take you to little screens. And then as long as your PowerPoint slide or document is showing in the background, click that in the screen share, and then it'll take a couple of seconds, and then you'll then have your screen being shared, and then you'll then get the panel, the Zoom panel, reduced, and it'll just show the bottom part of the panel. Right, okay, is that okay, Dorette? But the Zoom beginners web tutorial video I sent, please do have a look at that.
Right, yeah.
And that is really, really good. I mean, it's a really good, I've been using that with all the Warwick University students on this program, and they found that beginner tutorial really helpful. That might be helpful. Okay, so fantastic. Oh, very good, Josh. Well done. So we've got a document there. Okay, now, if you can't open up the presentations in the Padlet, it's because it's too big. So can you immediately download it? Okay, because it's very big, the Padlet has only got a particular memory for you to view, but it's got some memory for you to upload and other memory for viewing. So you just need to make sure that when you click on the presentation or any document, click download, and then you download it. Okay. All right. Thanks, Abia. Yes, that's fine. That's okay, Liz. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for reminding me. Simple things I always forget. So thanks, guys, for reminding me of these little things. Very important. And Liz, what you can do, obviously, it'll be recorded. So you'll be able to then watch it in your own time. And then you can come back to me from now until, well, from the afternoon until Thursday if you've got any further questions. Okay. Fabulous, guys. Should we break up for lunch now? Yes? Okay, well done. Amazing. Well done, guys. I'm going to turn the record button off, and then we will then meet again at 12:30. But I'll be back on here about 12:15-ish. Thanks, guys. If you've got any further questions in between, just jot them down in the chat box. Okay, guys. See you in a bit.